Hello, my name is Julie. Welcome to my channel. And in this video, it is a tutorial, and it is to show you how to make my small shelled stocking hat. So, without further ado, let's get started on making this hat.
All right, to get started, you'll probably be useful to have 3 stitch markers using a size J hook. Oh, I don't know if you see, we're going to use the Super Saver ombre yarn. Or if you want to go down to like a DK or higher, you can adjust hook size. You're either going to do more or less increases. All right, I'm going to start with a magic ring. I can show you quick. See if I can show you how to make this magic ring. So I usually use my 2 fingers. This is the same way as how I make a slip stitch onto the hook. So we're going to, all right, see if I can do it slowly. We're going to wrap the yarn around our fingers, like so. Then we'll wrap it around again. So it looks like that. Take our hook. We're going to come up underneath this first strand and go over this other strand and hook it up like this. And kind of leave your loop loose like that. Make sure I grab the right end. Kind of like using it to hold it open and make a chain. Leave it open, and then now we're going to put our single crochets inside this loop. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now to close this loop, we have this other tail here. Pull the tail, and that will close the loop. Cinch it tight. And and it tightens it up probably better than the ring. Okay, and now I showed you how to do the magic loop. Now to proceed on with our hat. We're working in continuous rounds. We're going to do 2 single crochets into every stitch. I'm going to use, notice I got 3 different, I got 1 that's pink and 2 that are red. Using the pink one because that's going to show me that this is the beginning of the round. Around, and this is where we're going to start making our small shells. So in this first stitch, we're doing 3 single crochets. 3 single crochets in the stitch is my small shell. And we are going to mark the first stitch of the round. So what we do now is we're going to skip a single crochet and do 3 single crochets in the next, or our small shell. And we're going to have 6 small shells in this round. Right. Skip a single crochet, do 3 single crochets in the next. Skip a single crochet, 3 single crochets in the next. Okay, now we're back at the beginning. We're skipping, like it says, we're skipping this last one of the round. So in a sense, we're going to repeat what we just did, but we're going to place our other 2 stitch markers. Okay, so we had skipped this one. So I don't know if you can see our little shell here. We're going to put 3 single crochets into the first single crochet of our shell from the last round. Now we're going to mark that, because in future rounds we're going to do our shell increases. We're going to skip this next stitch, which was the middle single crochet of our shell, and then we are going to do 3 single crochets into this next stitch, which was the last single crochet of the little 3 single crochet cluster. We're going to skip this next single crochet, which is the first single crochet of the next cluster, and we're going to do 3 single crochets into the next one, which is the middle single crochet of the cluster before. We're going to skip this single crochet, which was the end of the previous cluster. And then the next single crochet is the beginning single crochet of our next cluster, and this is where we're going to do another increase, even though we are pretty much just repeating the last round, which was skipping 1 single crochet, 3 in the next. All right, and then in this cluster, this is where we're going to introduce one of our other stitch markers. I'm going to put it at the beginning of this cluster, because in future rounds, this is where we're going to start increasing. All right, we skip this next one, and we do 3 single crochets in this next stitch. We're going to skip this next stitch, and then you notice that this is now, we're going to do 3 single crochets into this stitch, and this is going to line up with the middle of the shell from our previous row. We're going to skip this. Okay, we're going to skip this next one, and then we're going to do 3 single crochets in the next one. And this is where we're going to put our last marker, because we're increasing on this shell by putting 2 shells on the shell before it. 2 and 3, and we're going to put our last stitch marker to the beginning of that shell. Skip this next single crochet and 3 in the next one. That is 3 single crochets. We're going to finish up our round. We're going to skip this stitch, and then we're going to put 3 single crochets into this, which is the middle stitch of our shell from the row before. Okay, and now we're back. We had skipped 1, So now we're going to start at the beginning of the row, because now we are at a marker, and it's also the beginning of the row because I had designated the pink one. So I know that's the beginning. All right, so this first mark stitch, we're going to do our cluster again, or our shell, which is 3 single crochets. Put our marker back in the first stitch. Because we are going to do our increase, which is doing 2 shells on the shell from below, we're going to skip 1 stitch, do 3 single crochets in the next one. All right. We're gonna, okay, so I don't know if you can see, but there is our 3 single crochet clusters. So we're going to skip 1 stitch, the first stitch of that cluster from the first row, and do 3 single crochets, which is in the middle stitch of the cluster of the previous row. Okay, this time we are not going to skip 1, but we're going to skip 2 single crochets and do 3 single crochets, which is the center of our little shell from the previous row. Okay, so now we have approached our first marker. So we're going to do our ink. We're going to do 2 shells on this shell from the previous round. So we're going to skip 1 stitch. Do 3 single crochets into this first stitch. We're going to put our marker back into that first stitch. We're going to skip our next stitch and do 3 single crochets in the next one, which would have been the last single crochet of the shell before that. Right, we're going to skip 1 stitch, and do 3 single crochets or a little shell in the next. I don't know if you can see, it is the middle again. It's lining up with the middle of the 3 clusters. So now we're going to skip 2, because we're going to skip this one, which was the end of this shell. We're going to skip this next one, because we're going to put it in the middle of this next one. We're putting another little shell and 3 single crochets. And now we have approached our last marker. So we're just going to skip the 1 single crochet and do 3 single crochets into the mark stitch.
And then put that mark over mark again with the first single crochet of that shell. And skip stitch, do 3 single crochets in the next stitch, which would have been the end in the shell. So like I said, for the shell from the previous round, we're doing an increase of doing 2 shells onto this shell before it was on the first and the third single crochet from the round below. So now we're going to skip one. We're going to skip one. And see in the next shell, we're going to put our little shell into the middle of the shell from before. Just 3 single crochets. And we're going to skip 2 stitches because this represents the end of the shell. We're not increasing. So we skip this stitch, this one. Do 3 single crochets into our other shell, which is into the center of the shell before.
We are back at the beginning of the round. So pretty much what we're going to show you now is how we're going to do all our increases. Actually, this last round was just to give you a better idea how we do each increase. So we've approached, okay, so we just did 3 single crochets at the end of the round, and we're going to skip this last stitch. So we're just, I know it would be helpful just to look at into shell groups. So we have marked at the beginning, we have a marker at our first shell group, little shell group, and we're going to increase on this little shell, which is 3 single crochets, as I mentioned before. We're going to put 3 single crochets into the first single crochet of the shell, the previous row that we had marked. 3. We're going to mark it first stitch to know that this is going to be our increase shell. Because we're increasing on this, we're going to skip the next stitch and 3 single crochets into the next one, or into the next single crochet. Okay, and after we have done our increases of 2 shells per 1 shell from below, in our next shell, we just skip 1, and the next stitch should be the middle of the previous 3 single crochet or little shell cluster from the row below. So now until we reach the next marker, we're going to skip 2 single crochets and 3 into the next one, which should be the middle shell from the previous row. We're going to skip 2 single crochets and 3 into the next one, which lines up with the middle single crochet of our shell from the previous row. Now you look, we're approaching our next marker. So we're just going to skip this 1 single crochet and 3 and do our shell in this marked one. So now we're doing our increase by doing 2 little shells into the beginning and the end single crochet of this little shell from before. Or if you want to think of them as 3 single crochet clusters. That's 1, 2, and 3. Put our marker back in the first. Significant, this is where we're significant to show that we're going to increase in future rounds. We're going to skip the middle, the next single crochet, and do 3 in the next one. Now we're going to do 3 single crochets into middle of all our other clusters until we reach the next marker. So after we usually do an increase, it's usually only skip 1 single crochets and do 3 in the next 3 single crochets in the next single crochet, which should line up to the middle of the cluster before. We're going to skip 2 single crochets, do 3 single crochets in the next one, which again lines up with the middle single crochet of our little shell from the previous row. We're going to skip 2 single crochets and do 3 single crochets into the next stitch. Again, lining up with the middle. And we've approached our first marker of the round, and our round is over because we would just skip this last single crochet. So yeah, you just keep increasing in that matter, but I will try to show you one more time to better explain it. It might sound confusing. So we're at the beginning, so we're at a marker. So whenever we're at a marker, we're going to do 3 single crochets into that marked stitch. And put our marker back at the first single crochet of our cluster. And then after we do a cluster, or after we do a small shell with the marker, you're going to skip 1 single crochet and 3 single crochets into the next one. And then you're going to skip 1 single crochet one more time and do 3 single crochets into the next stitch. So now, until we hit our next marker, we're going to skip 2 single crochets and do 3 single crochets into the next stitch. Skip 2 single crochets, 3 single crochets into the next stitch. We're going to skip 2 single crochets, 3 single crochets into the next stitch. And now you see we are approaching our next marker. So we're just going to skip 1 single crochet and do 3 single crochets where the marker was. Put our first, and mark our first single crochet of that little cluster, little shell. Then we're going to skip 1 single crochet, 3 single crochets in the next stitch. And again, we're going to skip 1 single crochet and 3 single crochets into the next stitch. Then now we're going to skip 2 single crochets and do 3 single crochets into the next stitch until we hit our next marker. Approaching our last marker of the round, we're going to skip this stitch and do 3 single crochets in the marked stitch. Then you put a single crochet in that first one, that first single crochet of that cluster we just did, or our little shell. We're going to skip 1 and do 3 single crochets into the next one, or the next single crochet. Then again, we're going to skip 1 single crochet and 3 single crochets into the next stitch. Then now we're going to skip 2 single crochets and then do 3 into the next stitch. Skip 2 single crochets, 3 single crochets in this next stitch. And finally, because we're approaching, we're going to skip 2 single crochets and then 3 single crochets into this stitch here. And then not only have we approached our next marker, but we are at the, we just finished this round and we are about ready to start another round. Okay, so you're going to keep increasing in the mat, or you're just going to keep doing these rounds in the manner I showed you. Keep increasing until it's about the size you want it. I usually have to have it at least 6 inches, so about 6 to 6.5 inches for the top of this. And then we're going to do no more increases, and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, I have finished up my increase. So it's about 6 inches across, or 8 centimeters. Looks like it's about 16. It's about 6.5. So just to give reference of how many little shells between the markers, I have 9. I have 9 little shells between the markers, which is about 27 shells in total. So at this point around, we are done increasing. It means we don't need, we are not going to need these other 2 stitch markers anymore. And we just have one at the beginning of our round. So pretty much what we're going to do now is put little shells in between, from the previous round. So at this point, we're going to skip the last stitch from the previous round, and we're going to skip the first stitch of the first round, or pretty much we are skipping 2 single crochets and doing 3 single, our little shell, or our 3 single crochets. This time, instead of putting my marker, well, we could put it in the first one. I'm just going to put our marker in the middle single crochet of our cluster little shell, because that's where our shell is going to go at the beginning of the round. So from here on in, all we're doing is skipping 2 single crochets and doing 3 single crochets in the next stitch. Skipping 2 single crochets, 3 3 single crochets in the next one. And we're just going to repeat that around so you get the length that you want for your hat. This hat I had made at about, it was about 8 inches. See that? 8 inches in length, or whatever length you want for your hat. So we will just keep going around in that manner until our hat is at the length we want it. And I'll show you how to finish this off. Okay, I have got my hat the length that, let me see, the length I want it. So we're about ready to finish off this hat. I'm gonna cut off a little of the tail. Okay, I'm gonna use my yarn needle. Okay, get the yarn and the needle. There we go. Yarn. Here you come around. All right. Okay. We take our needle. We go into this stitch below that. Come around through the back. And then we're going to go through the back loop of that stitch. Kind of pull it tight. It looks almost seamless. And finish it off. There you have my small shell stocking hat. And now that's my second one I've made out of the Super Saver ombre yarn. You've seen my video about this yarn, which my son bought at Walmart for me, so I have enough. Probably do at least one more hat. So if you did like this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more content like this or any other type of yarn content, please subscribe to my channel. I want to thank you for watching, and then I will see you in my next video. Bye now.